This episode has been brought to you in part by the Azrieli Music Prizes. Join them in celebrating artistic excellence at the AMP Gala Concert, live from Maison Symphonique in Montreal, happening October 20th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Orchestre Metropolitain will premiere award-winning music by laureates Aharon Harla, Iman Habibi, and Rita Ueda. Learn more at azrielifoundation.org/AMP.
This is Bonjour Chai, the Yoh Malkeh edition. I'm Avi Feingold in Montreal. I'm here with David Sklar in Calgary. Alana Zakon is off this week. We are your frozen chosen. On today's show, we talk about Hasidic schooling in Canada. Is it similar to what the New York Times reported on this week? I also sit down with Jake Cohen, chef and cookbook writer, about holiday meals. But first, David, what's on your mind?
Well, I am about to get on a jet plane or some kind of plane and fly to Montreal this afternoon. So that's what I'm excited about right now, Avi.
Maybe there are drinks in our future tonight, tomorrow evening. I don't know. Come for a drink after Shabbos dinner. I don't know. Something.
Thank you. I'll message you and see what's happening.
So the Queen died. What was your relationship with the monarchy?
I mean, just like most people my age, I think it probably fits somewhere to ambivalence, where we grew up with the Queen, we grew up with the monarchy. Did we ever take it very seriously? No. I'm not someone who was going around all of social media saying we need to replace the monarchy, we need to get rid of the Commonwealth. I think I appreciate the Commonwealth. I don't want to turn into an American-style republic to our neighbors to the south. But I think it's sort of like, well, what does the monarchy really give us in Canada? And I think we're having more of these conversations of, do we need to move away from the monarchy? Do we need to evolve our country in some ways?
I don't think about it as much in terms of politics, because I think that we all know that they are figureheads and they do not serve, in terms of, for all intents and purposes, any real functional importance in terms of our Commonwealth or any others. So I'm going to bracket that. And I think that most people just see them as celebrities. I don't really have a connection. I don't see many people who see them other than these beautiful people who sit on podiums and wear crowns and do their thing, and we get to know all the details of their life, and they're carrying on this tradition, and they're incredibly wealthy. But at the end of the day, like, it's not like they really do anything. Even the Governor General, who is the Crown's representative in Canada, doesn't really have, any function that has teeth, right? It's important. It's a nice figurehead, but right?
Except when it does have teeth. And I know that there's a bill trying to be passed in Alberta called the Sovereignty Act if a certain person gets elected to the premiership. And the lieutenant governor sort of said, I have to review this because it may be unconstitutional. So there are these moments where these figureheads do come into play in our country and our province. Sure,
fine. I'll take that. But I think at this point, the monarchy is basically celebrity and prettiness, and they are blank slates. This is why, it was Harry and Meghan. I'm not a big follower of all these details, right? They were the ones that were doing all the tell-all interviews for like 2 years, right? This is what made it so scandalous, is that usually the monarchy does not speak in these ways. Right, that is the whole purpose almost, is to be as bland as possible. I got an email last weekend that was forwarded from somebody else. It was from some Chabad somewhere in the U.S. Was the Queen Chabad? Right, and then it went on to talk about how the Queen never really showed any serious emotion, and this is one of the hallmarks of Chabad philosophy, is to be in control of your emotions and not necessarily let them control you. And the Queen is clearly not Chabad, but she really shows these emotions, right? Did not show her emotions in this way, and so she really represented the model of Chabad emotional mastery. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but the whole point is that they are all these blank slates, that we can project whatever we want onto the monarchy. And yeah, I don't know.
Long live the king, may he be good for the Jews.
Yes, long live the king. And right after our sponsor, let's go to our discussion about Hasidic schools in Canada.
Are you in the market for a new watch or a special piece of jewelry? Are you looking for the perfect engagement ring to pop the question? Atelier Lou has all this and more. Eric and the team at Atelier Lou can craft a piece for you, or you can select from some of the exclusive designers that they offer. From a simple bangle to a statement necklace, Atelier Lou can make you or your loved ones sparkle. Located in the heart of Westmount in Montreal or online at atelierlou.com, visit Atelier Lou for your next watch or jewelry purchase. And when you do, make sure to use promo code BON18 for 10% off your next purchase. That's atelierlou.com.
When the New York Times published an expose on the significant issues in Hasidic schooling in the New York State this past week, it came as no surprise to many in the Jewish community. For one, they had been reporting the story for over a year. Many knew about it. They had also been circulating summaries to some of the schools in question in recent weeks, hoping for comment, and news leaked that the story was imminent. But more importantly, this wasn't really news to anyone involved in the Jewish community. Any current or ex-Hasid will gladly talk about the school system, either out of pride for their excellence in Jewish studies and Jewish values education, or out of frustration that their lackluster secular programs are talked about but never remedied. As Canadians, we also know about it because for 8 years, media have been reporting on a case where the Quebec government was being sued for inadequate secular studies in Hasidic schools despite funding and oversight by the Education Ministry. With us to talk about this story and how Canadian Hasidic schools fit into the picture is Shane Dussault Ovadia, who is a teacher and principal's assistant at Yeshiva's Toras Moshe in Montreal, and Shifra and Yohanen Lowen, who were the plaintiffs in the case against the Quebec government. Shane, Yohanan, Shifra, welcome to Bonjour Chai.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
Can we get started by asking that first question as to what is the relationship between what was being alleged in the story and what we actually see in terms of what's going on in the Canadian environment? Are the schools that much different? Are they somewhat better? Is there different oversight because of the Canadian system or the Quebec system being different? Yohanan, Shifra, why don't you guys get started? And then Shane, you can add in some points after that.
There was zero secular education for many years since the government started to intervene through our case. They founded a new program. They call it a homeschool program, but it's only till the age of 12, 13. But from the bar mitzvah age, when they change from cheder to yeshiva, there is zero secular education. So it's still a problem. But it's much better than it was before, where no child received any education. And then it's not just in Kiryas Tosh, but I think in all Hasidic boys' schools in Quebec, you have this intervention, and children are obligated to children are getting educated.
Yeah, so until 2011, like in the early 2000s, there was this big debate around illegal Jewish schools in Quebec. And there wasn't always a distinction made between Jewish schools, Hasidic schools, and so on. The Quebec population doesn't know these kinds of differences. So it became a big thing, and it led to a lawsuit in 2011 against the school that I teach in, Yeshiva Toras Moshe. And the judge ruled, basically the school was judged illegal because it looked like a school, but it wasn't satisfying the expectations for a licensed school. So what's going on? The Quebec ended up losing the case against the school because the judge said that the responsibilities for secular education, as defined by the Education Act for the license, it goes only if you get a license. If you don't have a license, then you're just like a music school. A yeshiva is just like a music school. It's not considered legally responsible for teaching English. Now, they did say that there's currently no law on the books. So after that, it became more of a concern. Okay, how can we make this into a law? And it led to, in 2017, partly in response to the Lowen lawsuit, it led to a new law that structured secular education. So basically before, if you didn't send your child to school, you didn't even report it. You just could send them to the yeshiva. No one knows about it. Nothing. There was zero regulations, right? So that's what led to Yohanen Lowen's situation. They didn't even know how many children were in this situation. After 2017, though, the school boards and now the Ministry of Education are responsible. You need to report your child. and you can get fines if you don't collaborate. Pretty big fines, up to like 20,000, I think. And then the school boards are supervising the development of children, and it doesn't have to be the same standard, but it has to show regular improvements from year to year. That's the basic idea. It's called Bill 144, Bill 144, and yeah. So now things have changed, and that's the gist of it.
Yohanen and Shifra, I'm curious, what was your experience like growing up and attending this school? What were you feeling when you were there? Did you feel that you were missing something, or were you unaware at the time of what was happening? When did you start to sort of click in that maybe there is something beyond the what you are being taught?
To tell the truth, I always felt imprisoned, but not just me. Basically, all the children in Cheder have this feeling. So, in one hand, they don't think that they are in a prison, like a jail, a prison. But in terminology, they don't think it as being a prison. But in the content in the essence, the definition of a prison, the children definitely feel that they don't have rights. They don't have human rights, and everyone can do with them whatever they want, especially parents and teachers and principals. And they also felt that the whole day in the Cheder is very boring, and no one likes Cheder. No one. Even the best. I was the best student in class, right? Both when I lived in London, and here when I studied in Kiryas Tosh. I was considered the best student. In Yeshiva, I was considered the best student and the most diligent. But I'm not gonna. But I still had a hell of a life. My hell was not just the yeshiva. I had other hells at home, but the yeshiva itself was also not a life.
And Shane, I'm curious, nowadays, do you see that same kind of feeling bubbling up with the students? And what's going on with the parents? Are they expressing those same concerns to you?
Yeah, so I take exception to the generalization there. I mean, there's definitely a lot of issues, and we know about this through the New York Times article, through different documentaries, and so on. When I first started going to the school, I had met Yohanen Lowen. I heard his story. I had read different reports, and I thought I had some sense of what was going on, and I imagined it as a very sad place. I mean, you hear this, you think that the children are all going to be, unhappy to be there. And I didn't expect that in many ways, it's also a very I mean, compared to, say, my experience in a public school, I mean, yes, you have some children who are miserable there, who feel like it's a prison. I felt like it was a prison in my public school too, and I remember looking at the bars on the windows. I'm like, oh my God, this is a prison, especially in my teenage years. But I also see children who are very joyful. I've done some in-house tutoring with Satmar children, and they would like, one of them who's very smart would tell me, like, what we're learning here, it's just little stuff, it's boring, but with Torah stuff, I could see the joy, in his eyes. And when teachers speak, I mean, the people who stay in the community, like, yesterday someone was talking about something, and everyone's very happy to talk about Torah. There is a lot of joy, I would say. If someone leaves Quebec and goes to California as a teenager, and they were very depressed when they were in Quebec, the way they might represent Quebec is this cold, isolated place. The children are put in this place with bars on the windows, teachers don't know what they're doing. It's true. But it's also the bias of an ex-member to any community.
Yeah. So then what happens with these students when they graduate? Are they able to land a job right away? Do they have a skill set preparing them for the modern real world outside? Or are they, as Yohanen mentioned, still feel a prisoner even once they leave this school/prison?
I get a sense that a lot of people want better English and better math skills, so that then it's easier to transition to other things if they want to. They need a skill set that helps them for their community. That's the main thing that they notice, and they are equipped, but life is expensive. Some of them want other skill sets. But for example, when someone complains about the education, about English and math, and then I say, yeah, and the science too. Sometimes they might say, no, but the science, that's nonsense. We don't need this stuff. I mean, it's not so important. So you get people who are critical of the system, but they're not criticizing the whole thing. They just want it to be reformed so that they're better equipped for other things. Yohanen's critique is more fundamental, is my impression.
So one of the things, I mean, you point out, right, that everybody's proud of the Jewish studies curriculum. So and I think Yohanen, you probably would admit, and I bet you Shifra also would admit that they're not trying to be bad schools. They're just trying to be great schools when it comes to Talmud study or when it comes to Jewish studies and Jewish values. And everybody's talking about how they may at least be trying, right? Yohanen's shaking his head and saying he doesn't agree. Maybe you can, I think that this is what they care about, and then there's things that they don't care about, and people are focusing on the things that they don't care about. Yohanen, maybe you can tell us, your experience even from the Jewish perspectives of things in terms of Jewish studies. But I want to move into other things in a moment after you. I have another idea.
For one moment?
Go ahead.
Okay. Because I am in contact with a lot of Hasidic people, and I actually asked people who still live in the community how they received this article in the New York Times. And one of them pointed out how this was not stressed enough, that the schools are a top-down system, meaning that parents have no say. There's no consideration about the kids. There's a system in place. You got to follow everything. There's no autonomy at all.
Sure. So that's actually where I wanted to go with this, right? Because my first question here is, the New York Times says that this is by design, right? That there is they don't want to do this. They don't want to have Jewish secular studies. They want to only care about the things that they care about. They want to take the money from the government and not provide the services that they're necessarily offering for it, and that there's something nefarious about all of this. There's something mean. There's something wrong about the way in which this is happening. I'm curious, how much of it do you think is by design, and in terms of like they're deliberately trying to trap the community, and how much of it is that the priority is A, and what ends up happening is, well, it means that we don't have time for English and math, and then you end up stuck in the community because you can't get a job elsewhere, right? Where everybody talks about, oh, these people, they're entrepreneurs and they have businesses and they have jobs, but almost all of them are talking about jobs within the community where they can function with the limited skills that they were received and not necessarily to be able to go out of the world.
So I believe it is by design. I mean, if you look at the whole picture, kids are being married off at 18 before they even have a sense of anything.
From 16 today.
There's even families who marry off at 16. Before they even have a sense of who they are and knowing anything about the world. And this is by design, because at the moment that you are married off, in an arranged marriage, I should point out, the children are expected to start a family right away without having any knowing about their own human rights, about their own choices, and birth control is forbidden. So in other words, this is the best way to propagate their party, because that's the only thing that these children are available for. They have no other avenues in life that they ever got a chance to explore, which means whether it's nefarious or not, what they do with the government money, I believe there is a lack of accountability. Like, anybody in this world does whatever they can to make the best out of life. And if the funds are available and they have the ways to get it, the problem is not all about getting it. The problem is that it's available in such an unaccountable way.
Mm-hmm. Shane, do you agree?
I mean, making it sound like a plan, I think there's a problem there, because those family structures have been going on for a very long time, right? People getting married young, not using birth control. So back then, whenever this started, I mean, it goes back probably thousands of years that there's these family structures. The goal was not to prevent people from leaving the community. That's just what people did. So there's an aspect where they hold on to the tradition. Now, it's true that there is a fight against the secular world, and there's an attempt to differentiate themselves, and that exaggerates those things. So now that's where you're right, that there's an attempt to, like, okay, what what can we do? But in the secular studies department, for example, the principal, who's Vizhnit Satmar, he has a master's in psychotherapy now. He's also a psychotherapist. And there's a genuine desire to improve results when it comes to English and math. And I should also say that it's very different. The financial aspect is very different in the US. I think Hasidic communities in New York, because of the way just the government is set up there, are more adept at getting finance money from the government. Here, there's I think Tosh, Satmar, Ksver, and Vizhnitz who do homeschooling. The other communities have these kind of probably subpar private schools. Bells, for example, has a French immersion school. And I speak to teachers, they're French great? No, but they have a starting point, and people want to learn. Like people come to me and say, oh, would you want to be my French tutor? People want to improve. It's not just a fight against the secular world. And I think for the Lowen family, you communicate a lot with people who are unhappy in that system, and you're doing great work with these people and helping them show that there's other ways of living. But I wouldn't use that sample to represent the entire community, because I really see so much genuine joy also in the community.
Yohanen, I saw you shaking your head very very forcefully. Do you want to comment on that? What Shane just said?
Yes, because I do not only have connections with people who are unhappy. I actually know people who consider themselves happy in the community, and it's not that I have any work showing people that they have to leave. On the contrary, very many people who contact me have a problem leaving because, as I pointed out before, they got married at 18, and now the threat is that they are going to lose contact with their kids if they leave. So their only choice is to stay if their partner does not want to leave. So for those people who are in the community and they do want a better life for their kids than they had, it's false to say that this is the tradition, because our parents and our grandparents did not have this kind of poor education. So this is not true.
And they didn't have these kind of restrictions. They didn't have these kind of control. There was never this kind of separation that they do today.
Between boys and girls?
The separation between boys and girls, but also the separation from the outside culture was never in that level. And today, what they do today, for example, in Satmar, they kick out the children. They don't take in the children if the parents have a smartphone, and they created the card games. The card games that is called Kedusha cards or something like that.
Holiness cards,
that talks about modesty or talks about holiness, and on every card it says, "Oh, if you have a smartphone, that means you are a monkey. You're gonna become a heretic, and you go to hell."
Oh.
And thank you. And
Shane is showing us one of the Kedusha cards.
These games, and then the children, when they see their parents having a smartphone or stuff like that, they tell on them, and that's why the parents are afraid. And that's how they keep control. This never existed in Jewish history before.
You mentioned a bit earlier, I just want to talk about the division between girls and boys, and I think I might know the answer to this question already, but what instruction are girls being given as they're growing up within this community, if anything?
So basically, the only thing that they are taught, they're not even, like in Satmar and in Tosh, they're not even taught Torah, like they're not even allowed to open a Chumash or a Gemara, like this is forbidden. They're only allowed to learn like small verses here and there. The only thing that they are taught is how to be a good housewife and a pious mother to raise their children. That's basically their future. That's the value of a
I mean, if they only learn that, then why is it that I speak with a Satmar mother and she speaks to me in good French, in good English, that she's able to, I said like, oh, we should do grammar. And she starts to talk to me about the history of the community, why they reject a focus on grammar. I mean, she definitely learned language skills, right? She didn't just learn how to be a good housewife. She has better language skills than her husband.
So I'm going to explain that.
But it's
in her time.
So basically the problem is that the boys learn nothing, so the women have to take care of everything. And if they don't have a good grammar, how are they going to talk to a doctor? How are they going to navigate government documents if they have to fill out? like this is a necessity. That's why I'm explaining. Everything is with a goal and with the ideal that they put into the kids. This is your future.
How much, Shifra, how much do you think that the entire perspective would be shifted if choice was really something that was valued within the community? Meaning, we are Hasidim, we have this lifestyle, we are very separate, and without any change, by being the strictest of the strict, but anybody can join and anybody can leave, and we're not forcing anybody to do this. We're not forcing people. If you're in it, you marry at 18 and you have a lot of kids and you do this, but at a certain point, when you're bar mitzvah or beyond, everybody has the choice to do this or do something else. Would that change anything for you, just having that choice?
So definitely choice is everything, because that's what every human being deserves, right? At the same time, it's not realistic to say that that would ever happen, because why would somebody want to be given only one way to live their life if there's a whole world out there, right?
Well, somebody
Nobody
can go
will
and
say.
say that I've learned and I've accepted that this is the holiest path and I get a lot of joy out of it, and I'm okay by walking away from whatever it is that I can do in the rest of the world, right? Think about the Amish. How many people go and do their Rumspringa, which is you go and explore the world, and then after a couple of years you say, you know what, I prefer to not be a part of the world, and I think that's a life that I want. And that choice is given to them, and then they end up there, and then that changes everything for them. And so I guess the question is, how much do you think choice is the big limiting factor here?
So even on that point that you pointed out about the Amish, I spoke to Amish people, and it's not like that. It's just the way that the media portrays
suppose
it.
that was actually
People
the situation.
are not given a real choice when you are shunned by your community and by your own family. It's basically tearing yourself
There's a
a
documentary
limb.
about it.
It's literally like cutting off a limb.
Sure.
That's not a choice.
I hear that.
Right?
So,
There's a documentary about it.
Yeah.
Sure. Shane, you wanted to respond to that.
Well, because it's something that happens. So in the field of new religious movements, which studies often small religious groups, right? The media often represents it through members who left and were unhappy with the community, and it leads to a certain representation. So sociologists mention that at the end of the day, like if you only rely on people who've left the community, you get it's just normal. You get a biased sample. It doesn't mean that people are not saying the truth, but it's inherently biased, right? So you have to speak to people of different types. And you have, like, for example, now, from what was said, it sounds like it would be impossible to openly use a smartphone and be a member of Satmar, right? I mean, it sounds like the repercussions are massive. But just the other day in the teacher's lounge, there's a Satmar guy from Williamsburg. He has a smartphone. He's dressed a little more snazzy than the others. And he mentions, he's trying to learn some math so that he can maybe go to college. He wants to catch up. He has some complaints about the education. He says he did pretty good because he has a lot of sisters. They helped him with his English. So he wants to learn more. He's open about it. He doesn't think he's going to get marginalized. And when I ask people like that, every time someone opened up like this, I was like, oh, okay, they kind of want to leave the community if they can. But when I ask more questions, I realize no, they love it. I mean, the people do a lot of charity work. There's a kind of community strength that in my public education Quebecois milieu, like there's certain like care between members of the community, like completely absent that in Satmar. Like, wow, people feel this much joy, they help each other that much. There's also good things, right? You have and you have people who leave the community who mention those things. Like if you look, there's a review to Unorthodox, the book, right? Someone who left. She says, I left 32 years ago. And the thing is, I read this book and I don't see any of the happiness. I don't see any of the happiness that's specific to the community. All I hear are the critiques. Now, for an ex-member, that's legitimate. But when you have people from outside the community who use that to represent the place, they think it's a kind of hell, right? That's how it's imagined. Well, for you it was.
Okay.
For you it was. But as an outsider, I kind of enjoy my place there.
Because you're an outsider.
Because you're an outsider and you don't have children in this system. Can I make a short comment? There's a professor, Moshe Krakowski, in New York, who wrote an article to defend the abusive Hasidic system. And in his article, he said, like you said, that you can't believe the ex-members because it's like an ex-wife. You can't trust them. Now, my answer to that is, first of all, we have today thousands of Hasidim who are in the system, and they are writing on social media every day what a hell they are living in. They are in the system. They are not ex-members.
I don't want to deny that there are many, many, many people, and I think that's the whole point of the original New York Times article, is that there are many, many people that are disgruntled, that have serious issues, that feel like they are going through lots of problems. And I agree with you. Right, I think that it is a significant problem. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here trying to make everything say that there's nothing wrong going on in the community. I think that is absolutely there. Everybody knows on the podcast, right, David, that I'm the one that puts my cards out there on the table. I think there are a lot of problems. I think that the community is trapping people. I think that it is, whether through marriage, whether through cutting off family members, whether through a lack of education, there is many mechanisms that the Hasidic communities do, and that's why I believe in choice, and I believe in trying to figure out ways in which we can have choices have there. But I want to wrap it up and go back to the schools, because that's really the focus of where we're at here. And if you can each of you answer, and I want to hear, because I imagine that Yohanen and Shifra, you probably have different answers from each other, and Shane probably has a different answer as well. If supposing the Hasidic world is not going away, that there are actually people that love being Hasidim and don't want to leave the community out of an active choice, they know what's going on in the world, what would be a good school system in the year 2022 that balances the priorities of the Hasidic community with the ability to teach people, with the ability to have studies, with the ability to have skills that people can learn to take into the outside world and whatnot? What does that look like? Does it look like two school systems? That's the way I think about it. We have a school system for the people that don't want to teach their kids anything, and then we have a school system where the kids can learn some some secular studies, and then the one that's for nobody, the government will deal with that, and it's another question. But maybe you have, I don't know what it looks like to say, what is the way forward? How do we fix this? Shifra, go ahead.
So I don't think that it's on us to decide how to fix it. We can make suggestions, but
it's not a responsibility. Exactly. I'm asking for your suggestion. That's it.
Okay, because I believe change is a very complicated thing. I mean, look at me. I was a very happy member of the community, really considered myself lucky to be born in Tosh, and it was a very, very slow change that happened as I had my 4 children, and as I started seeing things from under the rug, that I became so not just disappointed, but really disillusioned. So it's really something that happens in a very slow pace, and we would love for it to happen faster. So for me personally, I am delighted with any positive change that happens in the Hasidic system. Any way that children have more freedom, whether it's with a gym, with music, with art, with any way that children can breathe, and with stopping corporal punishment, that is a must. And with more accountability for sexual abuse, that is like something that the New York Times has not touched on, how much it goes on. There's a lot that can be done,
And not talking about hell to the children, about hellfire.
Shane, what would you think?
So in the U.S., there's like political issues that are coming out in the New York Times article, and I don't know how we're going to improve the situation there. I know in Quebec, the 2017 law definitely added a push that now there's at least a minimum. And I think the approach is so it's about 2 hours, 8 hours per week of secular studies in the communities like Tosh and Satmar. It's very little, right? There's a lot, you can't cover that much. But and that's going to be very hard, but if that can be pushed to 3 hours, 4 hours per day, right? 12, 15 hours, now we can have something to work with, right? I have no doubt that if Satmar is the most with Tosh, one of the most resistant communities. If those 8 hours, there's a genuine desire to make things better, then, we have something to work with. We want to expand it, and we need to get more, because they only hire Hasidic teachers now in Satmar, and they're very ill-equipped to teach the subjects, right, which is a huge issue. So the hope is that there's more people from within the community who improve their skills so that they can create good teachers. If there's good teachers and there's a bit more time, 15 hours a week, let's hope, then I think we can kind of get further in helping the children be equipped to learn chemistry if they want or become accountants, you know. Right now people do these things. Like there's some people with master's degrees, but they have to wait until their children are like old enough that they can go back to school, and it does change their life cycle. In a more like anthropological way, the way I interpret it is just there's a different approach to life cycle. You have children, you raise them, and then you can transition to having like a different type of career.
You guys are in two very different places in the Hasidic community. One as an administrator and almost a representative, and one, but you're both, I'm sure, speaking to a lot of people within the Hasidic community, whether on the, Hasidic WhatsApp or within the teachers' rooms, as we say, or wherever you're at. Do you find that the New York Times translating this into Yiddish actually had an impact and that more people got to read it? And I'm also curious whether what people are saying, right, both in the ex-Hasidic movement or the people that are happy to be within the community. Go ahead.
So of course,
Shifra.
No one is happy.
on the forums of the Hasidic people, there's a lot of people who are happy, and of course there are also people who are fearing anti-Semitism and are not happy about the whole thing about airing dirty laundry and all that stuff. But on the other hand, I believe that interpreting it in Yiddish is a very big step towards having a conversation, because the most disempowered members of the community are the ones who don't know English, and those are the people who have now more chance. I'm not saying that all have access to it, because not everybody even has a chance to have any access to internet, right? But there are more of them who are able to at least read this article and understand what's going on, really.
All right, Shane, you get the last word.
That's an issue where I think the Lowen family has a better insight, because in the school environment, no one is going to just go and praise the article, right? And the people I work with don't read the article. They mostly read mediated versions that sound polemic. They kind of whether it's COVID, whether it's the New York Times, every time I hear about the New York Times, it's always like a Hasidic version of the New York Times that's completely misrepresenting the actual newspaper, right? So I don't think the people around me, they don't really get it. But one effect that's interesting is that before, they're arguing against Quebec all the time. The New York state, though, great for the Hasidim. Now, I think it creates a sense that both Quebec and New York are going to push for more secular education. And so some of them are also resigning themselves a bit more. So someone who's actually very feisty in some ways, but he said like, okay, we have to learn French. And then a teacher says, oh, why do we have to learn French? It's stupid. And then he says, no, what is it stupid? You're stupid. We have to learn French. We live here. We got to learn French. So we have to make it, he doesn't know much French, but he wants his children to know better French. Right? So I see that there's some internal changes, right? But they're feisty people, that's for sure. And I think it's pushing things in the right direction. But I do have a concern when people outside the community use those types of articles and to represent it. There's a distortion that happens there. Like people in Quebec, people who hear about illegal Jewish schools, the idea they have of the school really doesn't have much to do with the reality.
Excellent. All right. Well,
I think I think just the opposite. I think the New York Times gives a too positive reflection, and the reality is much worse than what the New York Times said. And I would give you an example. The New York Times wrote that all the Hasidim are taking care of each other and no one goes hungry. I'm 44 years old. I'm 44 years a Hasid. I have hundreds of Hasidic friends till today, and I never heard about that. I know many people are going hungry in the Hasidic system, including my wife and me and my children when we were Hasidic.
I have personally contacted in New York a few people, because I have a friend there who is literally hungry every day. She doesn't have for bread, and there's nobody looking out for her. I have another friend who has grown up every single day, gone to school with an empty stomach. She had nothing to eat. Like this is not a real depiction of the community as a whole. Of course, there's a lot of helping each other, But to say that there's nobody going hungry, that is a bit of an overstatement.
I think we're going to leave it at that. And Yohanen, Shifra, Shane, thank you so much for joining us. And if there's developments that you want to talk about, I would love to have you anytime. Thank you for putting on Bonjour Chai.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
So the holidays are upon us. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, pre-fast, break-fast, Sukkot meals, and then you get to Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. There's a lot of meals ahead of us. And I thought that we would have a chance to think about it, get a little more mindful about the food, and then just maybe even get into the weeds a little bit about how to think about these meals. And so I brought on Jake Cohen, who happens to be in Montreal for a cooking demo tonight. Jake is the author of Jew-ish, a wonderful cookbook. What's the subtitle of the cookbook there?
Reinvented recipes from a modern mensch.
There you go, a modern mensch. And Jake is a modern mensch. Jake, welcome to Bonjour Chai.
Hello.
Why don't you start by just giving us a bit about your Jewish food journey?
Yeah, I'm a born and bred New Yorker, and I think with that comes this upbringing that centers Jewish food, a specific snapshot of Jewish food, this like real New York deli,
Daughters,
Ashkenazi,
Greengrass, Second Avenue
100%. And I grew up in Queens, so there's also like, I don't know, in Forest Hills, this place Knishnosh. That's all of what you would expect, these kosher pizza places / falafel shops /sushi. Now everything has to have a sushi menu. But I really grew up with this Jewish idea of comfort food. Yet that was really the only place I saw it. And it was in the background as I kind of made my way through culinary school, working in restaurants and media, in which these were never the dishes or the foods that I cooked, that I wrote about, that I got to really see outside of this kind of like deli prison. And as I started to explore what my addition to the food world was and how I would talk about myself and my family and my upbringing and so much of what I consider those foods that bring joy, it was all Jewish food. And then I met my husband, who's Mizrahi, and it became this kind of joint education of I had to show him everything about Ashkenazi food, and he had to show me everything about the Persian and Iraqi dishes he grew up with. And it just became like, this is all I want to do, is talk and eat and cook and explore Jewish food.
And so you left fine dining, and you're in this Jewish food world now.
That's the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're seeing. We're on this real precipice of Jewish food becoming more fine dining, and not like white tablecloth Michelin star, which it shouldn't be. But
why not?
Because I don't know necessarily. It can. There could be definitely one or two, but that's not what the core values of our food systems are. And you look at all these cultures, and sometimes it will translate well to fine dining, and other times, like a perfect example is in New York, you start to see like Persian food. There's no world in which Persian food should be individually plated and tweezed. It's all about abundance, and a lot of these dishes are about generosity and hospitality and having a big sprawling buffet of platters and bowls, and it just doesn't feel right because you're not able to really express that level of hospitality.
Sure. When I used to speak about Jewish food, and I'd been asked to speak about Jewish food a lot in the past, I remember one of the highlights that I always talk about is that Jewish food is slow. The Shabbat meal is the primal example of the slow food movement.
Completely.
It's a meal that is prepared over a long period of time that day, that is then completely ready by the time you're ready to eat it, and you sit and you enjoy it with friends over a long period of time and enjoy and talk and sing. And those are the hallmarks of the slow food movement, where they were doing all this stuff from scratch and preparing and showing you there's the opposite of fast food, and that's a Shabbos meal.
And I think that the other part of that, which is funny because a lot of it's rooted in this like patriarchal society, but I talked to my mother-in-law a lot about her growing up in Iran and her parents growing up in Iraq. And so many of these dishes are so long and labor intensive because these were these opportunities for communal gathering in which the women would spend time together in the kitchen rolling kubba or going through the rice. And this was their time to spend together, separate from the men. The men weren't a lot.
Sure. I'm the one that does the cooking.
Yeah.
We know that. Anyways. And so the one thing that hit me as I was going through your book is it's really one of the few books that is trying to do this ashkefardi fusion cuisine.
Yeah.
Right? Blend, like smashing the two together and not just saying we're doing some gefilte fish upscale like gefilteria and then we're doing some, kuba that's going to be interesting. Like you're really trying to mash the two cultures together.
Yeah. I think there's a time and a place for everything. And it's just what feels organic and what makes the most sense to you and your family. I always say, especially with Jewish food, authenticity can only really span as far as one family, because the way that your grandmother makes matzo balls versus mine, or her brisket or her gefilte fish, everyone has their unique definitions, and that is what's authentic to you. And as people move and they marry, all of that affects that kind of culinary canon, and it blends it together. And this is just my unique snapshot of my perspective of Jewish food. And it might look different than yours, might look similar, but that's kind of the beauty is you can be a voyeur in the Jewish food world. And I think the most important part is like, we could still be the same culture, celebrate the same rituals, even if the menus are completely different.
Yeah. So looking at these menus, right, I think if you count every Shabbos and every meal between the first night of Rosh Hashanah and the last meal of Simchat Torah, and you count all the lunches and all the Shabboses and the pre-fast and the break-fast, you're looking at close to 20 meals, right, that are supposed to be, in theory, big and in a, expansive, prepared, beautiful. It's got to be daunting.
It is. I literally yesterday, I got like 3 texts, one after the other, of different friends or family friends being like, what are your breakfast plans? And
as in they want to invite you, or they want you to cook for them?
They want to be invited to mine. And it's funny because I think there is this, I mean, it's a very like Seinfeld, Larry David-esque mentality, but there is this like martyrdom when it comes to entertaining, in which people think it's going to be this like torturous process, and really just requires a little bit of intention and headspace and planning. Mm-hmm. And I love it. I love the challenge. I love the ability to just welcome and open your doors. And these are rituals and holidays that are so important for community, so symbolic in terms of what we're talking about. We're celebrating the new year. We're putting intention towards an entire 12 months ahead. We are reflecting on the year behind and looking to make amends and repent. These are all things that, whether you're super religious or not, are incredible ways that you should be gathering with those you love and care about. So feeding them is just, you gotta have something on the table.
Yeah, so the rabbis have lists of sins and you have lists of tasks.
Exactly.
So walk us through that. So suppose, and I've done this already, so I'm not going to plead total ignorance, right? I've worked back at the house in kitchens. I've cooked. I've had my chef Laura Frankel. I remember the first time I was going to host Pesach Seders, and she asked me to work the 2 or 3 days leading up to Passover, right, so that they needed somebody to cook and to be a mashgiach and all this stuff. I said, great, but you're going to help me think about how to do all this whole like Pesach, like in a way. And she sat me down and she told me about lists, and lists should have lists to themselves, like their sub lists and all this. So I'm not that person. So walk me through, let's say I have 18 meals that I'm going to have. How do I like break this down so that I'm not so daunting? So I don't find it so daunting. How do I repurpose things? How do I, mix it up? What are your bits?
So the first is that everyone's definition of you need to make a first list of like, what are all of the items? How many mains, sides, protein, veg, that. But the real thing that's important is, what does my kitchen look like? How many burners do I have in my stove? How many racks do I have in my oven? That's the first thing that I always look at, because that helps define what I'm doing. I know when I'm prepping, and this could be days in advance, hours in advance, whatever I'm doing, I need to know that when it comes time that everyone is here, I have everything divided between maximum 3 sheet trays for my oven, maximum 4 pots or pans for my stove. Mm-hmm. And then nothing else. I'm not going to do something where it's like, all right, well then I need to pull that out and then reheat something else. And it's like, no. You have a limited space of how you can really execute a meal. And I want to have everything pretty much done. There's never a moment in which I'm planning a meal like, all right, I'm going to make something that has to be a la minute.
Yeah, no.
Crazy.
I mean, I'm going one step further and I'm saying to myself, how many of my sides can I serve at room temp or cold?
That's a completely valid, I mean, I've become a big
that belong
believer.
There.
Yeah. And that's when you get to pick a theme. So great, we're gonna go real Mizrahi today, and we're gonna have we're gonna fill everyone up so much with mezes that like we can go really like just a couple of big heavy hitter hot things and call it a day. Mm-hmm. So there's that in terms of I think about my Rosh and again, we're creatures of habit. So I'll never forget my husband's first year coming to Passover and then Rosh Hashanah, and you have these 2 dinners back to back, and it's the same menu. It's
that was going to be my next tip. Don't invite the same people to the night 1 and night 2.
But the thing is they want to, and like we love eating the same thing 2 days in a row. It's delicious. But that being said, it comes with this concept of always a soup. So I have the soup done, and that should be done. So many of the beautiful aspects of Jewish food is that they're meant to be made in advance or cooked low and slow. And the reason behind that is it tastes better. Everyone's always daunted by a brisket or braising a brisket. And my answer is always, there's no world in which you should be cooking your brisket the same day you're serving it.
No, it actually tastes better.
It tastes better. Like knock
3
it out
days,
on
2 days in the fridge.
Exactly. And I split it up. I always say, great. First day, you're going to braise it, let it cool, pop it in the fridge. Next day, you're going to slice it because it's cold and it'll be super easy. And then you just got to throw it on the stove and let it heat up over low heat for a couple hours. And same thing with like all my vegetables. I have them all roasted or blanched, ready to go. And then you're using so many sheet pans roasting all of them. And as soon as they're cooked, you get to consolidate them all on one pan so that you could just pop that in and keep it on warm. Same thing with like your starches. So if you're not going to be making like fresh pasta for any of these meals, and that's okay. That's okay. There's just
who's expecting pasta at a Rosh Hashanah meal?
But well, I will tell you. Here's the one thing that I do love, because we're talking about repurposing. One of my favorite things to do is in a moment where you're doing and again, this is also because a New Yorker and New York Jews are, like, I would say, separate from Jewish food, the number one food we grow up on is Italian American food. So my big thing is when you have your leftover brisket and it's mainly sauce and there's just like little shreds of brisket, I just cook some pasta and throw it all together. And like brisket pasta has become like the family favorite. Honestly, they like it sometimes more than the brisket itself.
Yeah, that's brisket. Okay, so that's, I mean, repurposing is huge. I'm a big fan of that.
Repurposing is huge.
Taking a sauce from something or moving it on and like taking the dinner from the night before. So that becomes completely. For sure. It's the Anthony Bourdain Rainbow Room brunch like nightmare that never want to eat anywhere that is repurposing stuff from the night before.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and we should champion that and say, yay, this is what we're doing, and it's great. Do you work in the world of the very symbols of Rosh Hashanah foods?
Yes, I think that's one of my favorite aspects of Judaism is symbolism. Okay, and I think the intention behind it is everything. So I try to have as much pan diaspora representation of like lots of apples and honey, but also lots of dates and date syrup.
You do a brie, right?
I do a baked brie. That one's actually become really popular for breakfast too, just because you can like have it out. And breakfast is so nosh heavy of bagel and lox, and it's a lot of like snacking foods that you want large quantities as fast as possible, but not necessarily. We don't serve any hot food at breakfast.
Yeah, why would you?
It's it should be a full dairy meal. It should just be like in your face, like schmear.
Except for the baked brie.
Except for the baked brie. Yeah, that's fair.
I do. Last year I did this. I took an Easy Whipper and I infused apple slices with honey so that they were like in the honey. That's like a modernist
amazing
fun on that.
Great.
Pomegranates, you use those?
Yes, lots of it. Lots of pomegranate molasses. I do. My family loves. I do this. We talked about it before, the pomegranate chicken wings.
Yep.
And that's just become such a fun party app that has a little nod to it, and then you have to just talk about it. It's all about the verbiage. Same thing with Seder. We go around and we talk about every single item of the Seder plate and what it's representing. And I do this thing in the book in which I love to do these like individual Seder plates where each thing from the Seder plate is represented by an actual food you can eat. Because
so that's
what I'm doing. What you want to do with any Jewish holiday, there's a reason. We don't just do it because we do it. We do it because someone made some parallel to Torah that's actually quite sweet.
And they're all in the Machzor. They have these like lists of stuff. So I'm going to do that, but I'm going to tell you first, apropos of Pesach, because I did this one year and it took off and people loved it. And now the kids insist that I make it. I took everything on the Seder plate and I turned it into one dish.
Love.
I turned it into a salad with romaine and some for the maror, and I put in celery and I put in parsley and I did chopped egg. I did instead of the shank, I took little lamb and I made little to tiny meatballs for like croutons.
Yum.
And then a charoset dressing.
I love
on top of
that.
that.
I love that.
And it was like the whole elements of all the Seder like in one dish. But I wanna throw all these things that are like popping off my head in terms of the symbolism and see what you're going to make with them. Doesn't have to all be in one.
Yeah.
Right? But let's, because so many of them, like people think about the sweet ones, but my mom was always insistent on serving a fish head or a sheep's head for Rosh Hashanah, to be that we should be the head and not the tail. What are you going to do something interesting with the head?
So funny enough is like I've gotten...
And I don't mean Swedish fish heads that people cut off.
No, I actually start seeing this as other things where I did it one year with heads of cabbage.
Okay.
And instead it's just like you use a full head of cabbage and still it was like a sweet and sour braised cabbage with that intention of like head of the year. That
you
being
didn't
said,
make head cheese?
I did not make head cheese. If you would like that, alowiak, which is like my mother loves to say, it's Arabic for go with God.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and for example, a lot of his Persian aunts will make oshereshte, which is this Persian noodle soup, because very much similar to Chinese New Year and a lot of Asian cultures, you eat long noodles for longevity.
Oh, interesting. Beets. People don't. I make beet salads all the time.
Yeah.
People don't eat them. Help me out here.
Half of the family loves it, including myself. Half don't. I'll give you a little sneak peek. I have in my next book. I do this dish that is a play on one of my mother-in-law's favorite snacks growing up. Very common thing in Iran is they would just boil beets and turnips together and then snack on them with just like salt and olive oil. So I turned them into a caprese where you boil them together and then chill them, thinly slice them, and drizzle with olive oil, chopped olives, scallions. And I've gotten really into that, but you're not going to convert everyone. It's one of those things, just like lean into the ones who love.
You have to call them Beats by Drake.
Beats by Drake.
No, sorry, 3, 2, 1. You have to call them Beats by Jake.
Beats by Jake. Love.
And then turn that into your, call that the dish.
Amazing.
Fenugreek. It always shows up in the art scroll.
Yeah.
As a kitchen person, I know what it is. You know what it is. A lot of people don't. Where do we get it? And why would I use it? And how do I turn it into something interesting on Rosh Hashanah?
It's a seasoning very common in a lot of Middle Eastern cultures, a lot of Indian cultures. It really came to the Middle East through the spice trade with India. And you'll see them in different ways because some cultures, a lot of Indian food mainly focuses on the seeds. And a lot of Middle Eastern culture mainly focuses on the dried leaves. And the leaves themselves are super fragrant. And some people think they're a little musky, but I think it smells just like maple syrup, which I really love. And I think that plays with the sweetness. Most commonly, I use it in a Persian stew called gorme sabzi, which is with beef and dried kidney beans and lots of chopped herbs. And that's like a big dish for spring because like herbs, spring, green, symbolism. But yeah, I think that it's a really wonderful dish, and anything that is herbaceous, any type of stew that you're really looking to like elevate with a bit of like floral notes. I love adding fenugreek.
Excellent. One last one then. And I remember being given as a child a spoonful of sesame seeds with like sugar mixed in as like that you should be as like, the same way that the pomegranate has a lot of seeds and you should have increase all your things. Short of tahina, right? What are you going to do with sesame seeds that will feature it heavily and not just as a sprinkling on something?
Yeah.
You can have fun with it.
I've been very into daka. I think it's an Egyptian spice and nut blend that I always do very heavy on sesame, and it's typically with any combination of hazelnuts, pistachios, walnuts, almonds, as well as tons of like coriander and black pepper. And it becomes this coarse crumble that you would often like rip bread, dip in oil, and then dip into this mixture.
Yeah.
I've gotten very into just tossing it, sprinkling it on top of all my roasted vegetables. So, for example, what I would do is I'd roast a bunch of sweet potatoes, then drizzle them with Ceylon, and then sprinkle the dukkha right on top, and it sticks to them. And then you just have this like beautiful texture of anything that's roasted, and it's soft with a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of crunch from the seeds and the nuts, and that's become like my favorite.
Beautiful. Jake, when's the new book going to be out? 2 years, 3 years?
1 year. No,
1 year.
luckily it'll be out a year from now. It'll be out everywhere.
I cannot wait to have you back on to talk more about Jewish food. Jake Cohen, thanks for coming on Bonjour Chai.
My pleasure.
And now it's that time in our show for our Nachas of the Week, that thing that makes us feel good and Jewish, Canadian-ish. David, what's your Nachas this week?
Avi, you never get to go first, and I feel I want to give you this opportunity to go first for our Nachas right now. I want to hear from you.
Okay. My Nachas this week will go out to the congregation Shar Shemayim, who this weekend will be celebrating their centennial anniversary in their current sanctuary. They're rededicating it this coming Saturday night. It is the 100th anniversary of their building in Westmount in Quebec here, and they are having a beautiful ceremony where they will be recreating the first service that they had. I would like to wish them a mazel tov. I don't usually do a lot of log rolling. Sometimes I do, I guess. But this one is one of those, a shout out to the Shar Shemayim for 100 years. Not many shuls, not many institutions get to do that. And this one is way older than that, but it's 100 years in this building, and that enough is a remarkable moment. David, back to you. What is your nachas? Well,
I'm sure people have heard the news that Shira Haas is going to star as Sabra, the Israeli superhero, in the next Captain Marvel movie coming up in, I think, 2024.
Yeah, I do not follow the what is it? The MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka the Tanakh of superheroes.
It is like the contemporary Torah Tanakh. So I think it'll be really cool to see an Israeli superhero. I mean, there's some people that are very upset all over the Twitter sphere that there is now an Israeli superhero joining the MCU or the MC universe. I'm interested. I think it might be a good. Will it be a good thing for the Jews? I think it'll be really interesting to see her perform as Sabra.
What do you think her superpower is going to be? Is that discussed? Has that been announced?
Well, there have been made some jokes all over the interwebs, sort of saying, is her superpower arresting and hurting Palestinian children? Ooh, that was the one joke I heard.
I was going a lot lower than that one. I was going for like, does she go at like hypersonic like frequencies and like disables you like that? Yes. You go to, or does she like shoot out hummus, right? This like, I don't know, like what else have you?
My mind is drawing a blank right now.
Really? Come on. I mean, there's got to, what are Israelis? Come on.
She has a startup. She moves to New York City and starts a startup.
No, that's her cover story, but what's the superpower?
She catches you in line at the airport and asks you a question about your bar mitzvah, where you had it, and what high school you went to.
Oh, she's the interrogator.
She's the interrogator.
Oh, okay. I like that. Okay, well, Shira Haas, if you're listening to this, which you're probably not, come on our show. Tell us about what you think the superhero should be. Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending September 17th, Shabbat Parashat Ki Tavo. The show is produced and edited by Zach Kaufman. The executive producer of CJN Podcasts is Michael Freeman. Our music is by SoCalled. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you could share Bonjour Chai with a friend. It really helps to get the word out. And as always, you can email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca. I'm Avi Feingold.
And I'm David Sklar.